Today, the second part in the Mocro Mafia series, we discuss a man who was there from the very beginning. This man was a pioneer of the Dutch cocaine trade, a man who smuggled shipments worth hundreds of millions, and who was just as likely to be found with grenade launchers as with millions in cash. His name, Mink Kok, a ghost to the police, a strategist to the underworld. Sometimes locked up in a Lebanese cell, sometimes drinking on the Costa del Sol, and often a suspect in assassinations. And despite all the violence and wars surrounding him, he's still alive. How is that possible? And how did he become a legend in the Dutch underworld? This is the complete story of Mink Kok. Mink Kok was born on June 24, 1961, in Amsterdam. His mother raised him in a city constantly in flux. He didn't meet his father until later in life. In the 1970s and 1980s, the first stories emerged about young Amsterdammers making quick money with hash. And among those youngsters, Mink was one of them. Mink was ambitious. He wanted bigger, further, more. At a young age, he became fascinated with weapons. He joined a shooting club and learned how to use them. He briefly studied law and then dropped out. He claimed it was because he didn't have enough time for sports, but in reality, he was already dealing drugs. He connects early on with people already deeply involved in the criminal underworld. Stanley Hillis and Jan Famer become his mentors. They already have bank robberies and burglaries to their credit. Both are also more than a decade older than Mink. The hash trade becomes his first training ground. But he sees what's coming. Cocaine. The white gold flooding Europe. And Mink is smart enough to be one of the first to make the switch. The 1990s were the golden age for the Dutch underworld. Amsterdam became a hub for ecstasy and cocaine. And Mink Kok played a key role in this. He collaborated with notorious figures from the old guard, names that ruled the city at the time. His reputation grew rapidly, not as the man who shot, but as the man who organized. He had connections in South America, in the ports, and within the city itself. His name regularly appears in investigations, large shipments of cocaine in Rotterdam, ecstasy exports to England, investments worth millions. The police know this man is at the top, but time and again, evidence proves difficult to find. To the outside world, he remains elusive. To the underworld, he becomes a heavyweight. The police are doing everything they can to catch the major criminals, using ever-evolving methods. They employ informants who can smuggle drugs with impunity to remain undercover in the underworld. But it doesn't work. The informants make a fortune and forget their role. They set up entire cocaine routes and the experiment is stopped. Mink remains elusive. But power in the underworld comes at a price. Throughout the 1990s, several liquidations are linked to Mink Kok. Rivals disappear, business partners are found dead. According to the police and the judiciary, he has blood on his hands. But as with other top criminals, hard evidence is lacking. He remains standing in court. And that only strengthens his reputation, because in the underworld, they know rumors are often deadlier than convictions. On April 10, 1993, the tranquility of a residential neighborhood in Alkmaar was suddenly shattered by a brutal murder that would haunt detectives for years. Jaap van der Heijden, a known drug dealer, was about to enter his home. A plastic bag hung on his door. Not a shopping bag, not an innocent package, but a bomb, detonated remotely. The explosion was devastating. The front door shattered, glass flew through the air, and van der Heijden was literally blown away. The explosion was so powerful that neighbors ran from their homes in panic. His girlfriend was grocery shopping, but 2 children were sleeping inside. Fortunately, they were uninjured. It could have been much worse. Jaap later died in the hospital. It was a murder unlike anything the Netherlands had ever seen. A massive search began for the police. The list of suspects was long. Van der Heijden had plenty of enemies, but one name stood out. Mink Kok. Not because he was seen at the crime scene, but because he's known as an explosives expert. Yet the investigation stalls. The file disappears into a drawer. For now. A year ago, the police received an anonymous tip. The tip concerned a house in Amsterdam. The police raided the premises. What they found shocked even seasoned detectives. 93 kilos of cocaine, an arsenal of weapons, rapid-fire rifles, pistols, revolvers, and entire boxes of ammunition. And as if that weren't enough, grenades and explosive. In a parked car in front, they found a bag containing over 2 million guilders in cash. Everything was linked to Mink Kok. He denied the charges. He claimed he had nothing to do with it, but the court saw things differently. The Amsterdam judge sentenced him to 6 years in prison, but by appealing each time, he didn't serve his sentence and spent years in freedom. And even in 1999, Mink was still free. But then another house is raided, not based on a tip, but because neighbors were complaining about flooding. Inside, the floor is indeed wet, but the police also find a huge quantity of weapons. Using fingerprints, the police prove the weapons belong to Mink, and the judge sentences him to 3.5 years in prison. He will, of course, appeal again, but this doesn't reduce his sentence. He must now serve the full sentence accrued, approximately 10 years. The assassination of Jaap van der Heijden with a bomb is now a cold case, but the police reopen the case, and Mink is the prime suspect. The motive? Jaap allegedly lost 1,200 kilos of cocaine and was reportedly talking to the police. Mink is still in custody at the time and denies everything. The prosecutor demands a 10-year prison sentence, but Mink is acquitted. When Mink is finally released, many major underworld figures have been assassinated and replaced by young men. The Black Mafia rises and takes over. Jan Femmer, his mentor and friend, is also gone. His other mentor, Stanley Hillis, is still around, but their relationship has deteriorated. February 21st, 2011. Winter hangs heavy over Amsterdam. On Feyze Ausstraat, near the Watergraafsmeer, a 64-year-old man gets into his car. It's Stanley Hillis, Mink's surviving mentor. Once one of the most powerful criminals in the Netherlands, now still a kingpin in the drug trade. He starts the engine. But before he can drive out of the street, the rattle of automatic weapons sounds. He's riddled with bullets from a passing car. Bystanders watch as his vehicle slowly comes to a stop against a pole. Hillis, feared and admired for years, is killed instantly. For the police, it's a hammer blow. A man who had escaped prosecution dozens of times finally falls under a hail of bullets. A name is immediately mentioned: Mink Kok. Officially, he was never charged, but whispers in the underworld suggested that Hillis's death stemmed from old feuds, and that Mink knew more about it than he would ever admit. From 2010 onwards, the underworld increasingly moved to Spain, and especially to Marbella. Luxury villas, swimming pools, expensive cars, but behind the gloss, money laundering, cocaine trafficking, and assassinations. Mink also chose Marbella as his new base. He lived in luxury, but remained in the shadows. But wherever Mink appeared, things happened. August 2016. Spanish police make a discovery that shakes the underworld to its core. A body is found in the garden of the villa of Samir Bouyakrishan, who was liquidated in 2014. In the previous video in this series, we discussed Samir's story. The body in his garden turns out to be Belgian drug dealer Jan van Zandvoort, missing since 2011. And his last meeting, according to sources, it was with Mink Kok. Mink's involvement was never proven, but the connection was enough to put his name back in the spotlight. For many, it confirmed what they already suspected. Doing business with Mink is gambling with his life. Kok, who married a Lebanese woman, was arrested in Lebanon the same year Jan van Zandvoort disappeared for a shipment of 53 kilos of cocaine. The judge sentenced him to 4.5 years in prison. He denied the charges and claimed he was visiting family. He ended up in Rumi prison. The conditions were appalling, but he was imprisoned until February 2016. In 2020, Dutch police cracked Sky ECC. For months, Dutch police monitored underworld conversations conducted using cryptography. They also monitored conversations Mink had, and then in 2022, he was arrested again in Lebanon. This time, along with his son-in-law, Najim Z. Why? The Netherlands demanded his extradition, and he was. The suspicion? Large-scale drug trafficking from South America to the Netherlands. A large number of weapons were also found. With the cracked cryptography, prosecutors built a case. The two are suspected of transporting 750 and 840 kilos of cocaine that were intercepted in the ports of Antwerp and Rotterdam. What makes Mink Kok so special? To some, he's the embodiment of the shrewd international drug businessman. Someone who builds networks, sets the tone, and makes deals with cartels in Colombia. To others, he's nothing more than a cold-blooded killer. A man who makes people disappear when he sees fit, who doesn't hesitate for a second to use violence. Perhaps the truth is both. The fact is that Mink Kok was one of the first to pave the way to the modern Mocro Mafia. Without pioneers like him, the Dutch cocaine trade could never have become the multi-billion-dollar industry it is today. A question that keeps recurring: how is Mink Kok still alive? While his contemporaries, Samar Bouyakrichan, Gwinnett Martha, Stanley Hillis, have long since been riddled with bullets, Mink is still out there. Perhaps he's smarter, perhaps he keeps his head down. Perhaps he's simply too important to take down because even his enemies would rather do business than waste bullets. But in the underworld, one rule applies. No one is safe, not even Mink. And then, in July 2025, he is sentenced again in the Netherlands. He is serving 6 years in prison for preparing to smuggle 370 kilos of cocaine. This shipment arrived at the port of Antwerp in 2020. He will remain in prison for at least the next few years. This was the story of Mink Kok. He survived prison years in Lebanon, saw countless rivals fall, but is still standing, a man who shaped the criminal history of the Netherlands. But is this the end? Absolutely not. Mink is still in the scene. So who knows? Maybe there will be another episode about him in the future. If you like this series, let me know in the comments who you'd like to hear in the next episode. Thank you for listening.